kind of means that the top two coaching candidates that the Raiders were essentially kind of targeting, I don't imagine that the Raiders weren't also looking at Aaron Glenn as a potential head coach hire for the organization. Earlier today, too, I'll just say this real quickly, that the Raiders did hire John Spytek, who was the assistant GM to the Buccaneers. He was with that organization since 2016. I have some notes here to talk about that. And he has also worked under head coaches like Mike Holmgren, Andy Reid. I think Gary Kubiak was another one. So he's been around the player personnel, the executive level since I think it's 2004 is like kind of when he started an internship. So in 2016, when he was kind of brought on to the Buccaneers as a player personnel, obviously he was somebody that worked within that front office that also kind of helped bring in Tom Brady amongst other draft picks and picking up other players. So, he does have the ability to find players, to connect, and also to within the Buccaneers organization, they've been known to like really help incentivize players to get the best out of them. And when there's an incentive coming up, they make it a point to try to do their best to reach that incentive. So I'm curious what Spytek does. A thing that I read too, because the news was broken by Paul Gertes. One of the things that was in there was that Mark Davis made it a point that he did not want to hire a first-year GM and a first-time head coach. So with that being said, with now having John Spytek, who is now on the GM side, so we found the replacement to Tom Telesco, who, by the way, I'm not sure if Tom Telesco should have been let go after the first year, but that's fine. We're past that now. So I've got 4 head coaching candidates that I think that the Raiders should go for and who I think have the best possibility of getting the job. And again, some of the metrics I've kind of measured on is, are you a previous head coach? And also to what style or what are they bringing to the Raiders that the Raiders do need? Because again, I'm going to be very honest about my position of this. I did not agree with the Raiders letting go of Antonio Pierce after his first full season as the head coach without the interim tag. I don't think they gave him enough time. Tom Telesco, one of the things that I did not like is if some of the reports are true, which is that wasn't even a call given to Washington to see if they were interested in trading down from the number 2 to see if they can go up there and capture, Jaden Daniels. Now, again, not to default Tom Telesco for not even trying. Maybe Washington just made it clear we're not interested in trading away this pick. So, why try if they're not interested? So I can get that. Although I do think that Tom Telesco could have found good talent given like maybe another season. But again, I don't know what the inner workings were with the Raiders. Maybe the fact that Tom Brady coming in does change the fact that Tom Brady, Mark Davis, they want to completely overhaul what the Raiders have been doing and maybe now change things in terms of bringing in different people with different cultures and mindsets. And also too, with the head coach, maybe bringing in one with experience and rather than maybe the hotshot head coach. So I think that kind of brings things into clarity a little bit. So here are my 4 candidates that I think would be good head coaches, or at least good options for the head coach. One of them, this is actually going to make Michael with Boom Broadcasting a little upset. Well, not a little upset. He may not like this. I think Mike McCarthy would be a good choice. And here's why. Again, head coach of the Green Bay Packers, led them to the Super Bowl, made multiple times of winning their own division, getting into the playoffs. Is his playoff record as good as we would want? No. But here's the thing. He's gotten into the playoffs. And also, too, when he took over for the Dallas Cowboys, I think he got them to 3 consecutive 12-win seasons. And the season essentially that now he is departed from Dallas, they were pretty much out of the running for any wild card berth for a while. But, even with Dak Prescott being injured, even with a defense that was injured, he was able to coach them up to where they ended on a pretty respectable level. And, it could have been a lot worse, all things considered. But Mike McCarthy has shown that he could help turn around a team at different stages of where they're at. So he helped, grow the Green Bay Packers and get them into a championship caliber team. And then obviously being a prominent NFC team for several seasons after that. Then when he took over Dallas, they had won the NFC East, I think once or twice. And then obviously they were a highly touted team The only thing that faltered them is when they got into the playoffs or anything like that. Of course, that was where they would falter. I think Mike McCarthy would be an interesting one. Obviously, he's been around the league for several years. I think what he would bring would be obviously a huge veteran presence in terms of head coaching and culture and getting guys to buy in. You know, he is more of an offensive minded, so I'm curious to see how that'll go because obviously he has Brock Bowers. We need to figure out what we're doing with the running back position. We have a young offensive line that we'll probably add to within the draft, but we don't have a quarterback. So with that number 6 pick, are we going to go with a certain player? Are we going to trade up from there? Are we going to trade down to get multiple picks? That's another question. So I think Mike McCarthy is a really good option for the Raiders. Will he take the job? Probably not. He's probably going to go to a place that has more of a structured like quarterback already in place, maybe some foundational pieces, and he's just maybe going to add to it. But I would like the Raiders to at least entertain or think about bringing in Mike McCarthy, even if we may not get it. I think that's a good one. Drew Code Sports Talk is supported by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is your go-to app for tickets, making it super easy to find the best deals. They even rate each ticket deal on a scale of 1 to 10, so you know you're getting your money's worth. And as a special thank you to our listeners, we've got a promo code just for you. Use Drew Code at checkout to get $20 off your first order. That's $20 off your first purchase, whether it's for the game that you've been dying to see or that concert that everybody is talking about. Head over to SeatGeek now, find your perfect seat, and use Drew Code for $20 off your first order. SeatGeek. Get your tickets to the action today. Another one, which is actually kind of funny because Drew, a couple weeks ago when he was on with me, he had a conspiracy theory about the reason why we didn't hire Cliff Kingsbury was because of this and that. And now that AP's out, we can bring in Kingsbury. And that's an interesting one. So I think another good candidate would be Cliff Kingsbury. And here's why. Previous head coach experience with the Arizona Cardinals has already stated how he's learned a lot. The fact that he has helped coach Jaden Daniels and his play calling in the game with Detroit Lions and throughout the whole season, to me, has shown some huge growth and maturity. He's not just this hotshot coach that essentially got handed a head coaching job when probably didn't need it. And now that he's a coordinator on the NFL level, he's shown that he can play call. And also too, like maybe now with that learned experience in Arizona, take that over to Vegas, seeing if that can also change. I will say though, this fan base is very, very hard to coach for and play for because we are so quick to just say it's not working, get it out of here, and we don't give it time. So I think Cliff Kingsbury is an interesting one for the sheer fact that, again, it fits Mark Davis's criteria. It's a young coach, offensive predicate, kind of a little bit of a John Gruden type of situation where it's a young coach, offensive minded. We'll see. This third one has no head coaching experience to start, but I think from where they come from, I think is interesting to bring in what they've been doing because Joe Brady, who's another one who I think would be very, very interesting as a head coaching candidate for the Raiders, has been with the Buffalo Bills for a while, coaching under Josh Allen with that expectation that Sean McDermott has placed in Buffalo to where they are an AFC playoff team almost every year. Granted, like, you know, maybe getting knocked out of the wild card or divisional round, whatever the case may be. But I think that Joe Brady bringing in that into the Raiders organization would be very interesting. I know that he's a name that's kind of circling. He may wind up somewhere else, which is probably the more likely option. But I think even though it doesn't really fit Mark Davis's idea of what he would like with a first-time head coach and a first-time GM, I think that Spytek having enough experience as an assistant GM with the Buccaneers could maybe suffice with the type of experience that he's earned that maybe Mark Davis would sign off on getting Joe Brady, if Joe Brady, you know, for some reason did really well in, you know, interviews and whatnot and see how that all turns out. Although I feel like Joe Brady is going to end up somewhere else, but I think this would be a good candidate for the Raiders. And the last one, and this one is probably turned into the front runner for a lot of Raiders fans recently. And this is, again, after the Ben Johnson news, is Pete Carroll. Now, again, Pete Carroll, for those that remember, used to coach at USC, came over to the NFL coaching the Seattle Seahawks, helped them win a Super Bowl with a young Russell Wilson and the Legion of Boom way back when. Of course, like since the Legion of Boom kind of aged out and new players have come in, Pete Carroll still had the Seahawks pretty relevant for, some wild card berths, some divisional games, some seasons missing the playoffs. The season essentially that he was in, his last season, Seattle was a pretty comparable team. And it looked like when Seattle parted ways with Pete Carroll, it was kind of a shock to Pete Carroll. So it sounds like he still had a lot of fire in him. He's now had a whole season off. Now, granted, Pete Carroll's more of a defensive kind of style head coach. That's really like what he prides himself in terms of that side of the ball. But I think what makes Pete Carroll attractive for the Raiders, and I think he would be my number one candidate if I was the Raiders. He's really the only head coach that comes to mind outside of Mike McCarthy that can go into our AFC West division where you have Andy Reid, Sean Payton. You also have John Harbaugh, or is it Jim or John? I think it's Jim Harbaugh. Excuse me. I always get the brothers mixed up. It's Jim. So you have Jim Harbaugh in there as well. And then you bring in Pete Carroll, who Pete Carroll has had battles with Jim Harbaugh, has had battles with Andy Reid, has had battles with Sean Payton. And so he is the one coach that is probably still out there in NFL circles outside of some other coach that becomes available for some odd reason. He's probably the only coach with a huge reputation that can deliver on changing the culture, understanding how the front office situation works, player evaluation, elevating players up and having them coaching them up and bringing in a staff that he can trust to help facilitate better quality of coaching, play calling, would just be something that the Raiders haven't had since, I would say, honestly, Jack Del Rio. And Jack Del Rio didn't really have success in Jacksonville when he was there, but the success that he did have with the Raiders, this is when we had Derek Carr in 2016, where we won 12 games. It's going to remind me of that, where there's actually some experience and some culture developing and building. I think Pete Carroll can get in there and do it. I wouldn't say relatively fast, but I think he can turn it around pretty quickly, a lot quicker than what Raider fans probably were hoping for with Antonio Pierce. I think Pete Carroll is a really, really good candidate, and I would actually like to see how he works with Tom Brady, who, again, they met in the Super Bowl where the Patriots were able to beat out the Seahawks. But, with Tom Brady, with John Spytek, with that experience, and then with Pete Carroll, I'm curious to see how that regime would do when it comes to drafting, player development, coaching coordinators that they could bring in, schemes, all that sort of stuff. I think that's a very interesting thing. However, I think with having John Spytek, and if we did bring in Pete Carroll, and who knows, news can break tomorrow regarding Pete Carroll going somewhere else or going with the Raiders. We have a lot of questions that we have to answer about certain players that the contracts are up. Max Crosby is a big notable one. He's got no guarantee money left on his current deal. Are we re-signing him? Are we going to trade him? Or, is he going to be a cap casualty? Also, too, who are we going to sign in free agency? I think. What are we doing at the quarterback position? Are we going to, do our best to trade up into the top 3 picks or a top 2 pick to get a quarterback? So I think those are all very interesting, intricate questions that I have as a Raiders fan. But ultimately, having John Spytek helps that in the 4 candidates that I had mentioned with Kingsbury, Mike McCarthy, Joe Brady, and Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll specifically would probably be one of the better coaches that we can bring in, regardless of age. I think he's 73 either next month in February or I think at the end of January. I think he'll be 73. Regardless if he's the oldest coach in the league, he has a lot of coaching experience left. And I think that we need somebody that can compete in the division. And I think Pete Carroll would be the guy for that. So